All right, welcome guys. I think we are just missing one, waiting for Tad. Just a heads up, make sure to mute your microphones whenever you're not speaking because it will echo a little bit. But we are live and there is Tad. I'll let you guys go ahead and get started. Thanks.
Thanks, Astrid. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second day, and this will be the wrap-up session. So what a 2 days we've had with our presentations. We've had those of you that were just on with Dan from CoBank did an outstanding job on the economic forecast and what's going on. So we're looking forward to this session as well. This panel will talk about regionalization efforts. Our first speaker will be Nathan Ohle. Nathan is the CEO of a very familiar group to most of us, Rural Community Assistance Partnership. Nathan has been in and out of rural economic development for several years, both at the federal and state level, as well as in his home state of Michigan. Nathan continues to do a bunch of not-for-profit work, and those of us that know RCAP knows how important they are in assisting some of the smallest rural communities in America. So that's one of the things we look forward to help on when we need help with the small communities, and the RCAP networks do a great job of that. Next, I'll introduce Tad Bohannon. Tad is the CEO for Central Arkansas Water. He system 25,000 taps and a population of about 450,000. Does both retail and wholesale. Prior to Central Arkansas Water, Tad represented several utilities throughout the Arkansas area. He's taught, he's an attorney, but one of the probably most famous parts of Central Arkansas Water is a little black dog by the name of Vessel. And Tad's Central Arkansas water system had one of the first leak detection dogs in the country. And so those of you that follow Vessel on Facebook know him well, and it's a neat deal that Tad is integrated into their system. Last but obviously not least, Randy VanDyke, the CEO for Iowa Lakes Regional Water. Randy has been with Iowa Lakes for 4 decades, and his system currently serves about 1,400 rural users, 13 towns in both Minnesota and Iowa. Iowa Lakes also is known for doing some innovative wastewater systems for small communities. And like many of the systems, the regional systems in Iowa have been involved. Small communities handle wastewater issues when they've had problems for several years now. Randy also, as part of Iowa Lakes, has his own construction company, which has been key to him being able to grow and expand his system. Randy's been very active in rural water issues for years and years and years. Past president of the National Rural Water Association, as well as several key positions in that organization. Been very active in all regional water issues in Iowa as well as nationally for decades. And most importantly, is on the team that initially got Association of Regional Water Organizations off the ground, and just currently is finishing up his second term as president of the Association of Regional Water. Randy, thank you for all you've done. Tad, we'll start with Nathan, and then we'll hand it off to Tad and then to Randy to wrap this up. I think these sessions are normally set for just under an hour, so I guess if each of you can, maybe 15, 20 minutes at the most, that should keep us on our time slot so we get people on their way for those joining with us. So Nathan, I'll turn it off to you, and I'll go dark on the mic and the camera.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with everyone today. First of all, I want to say I hope everyone is doing well, that you're safe and healthy. I know it's challenging times for everyone across the country, and so really appreciate the opportunity to be with you virtually. Obviously, hope that in the future we can do these things in person, but really just appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what RCAP is doing, but also sharing a great conversation with Tad and Randy, quite frankly, about the importance of regional collaboration and regionalization when we're talking to rural and tribal water wastewater systems. So first, before I get into that topic in particular, I want to spend just a moment for those of you who don't know who RCAP is. RCAP is the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. We're actually a national network of nonprofit partners. You can see in the map here, we have 6 regional partners across the country. We cover every state and territory. And really, the strength of our network is in the long-term trusted relationships that we have on the ground. Through those 6 regional partners, there's more than 250 technical assistance providers, someone in every state and territory across the country, that is working with rural water, wastewater operators, managers, systems, and city councils and mayors to ensure that they can build capacity and continue to provide access to safe drinking water and sanitary wastewater across the country. You can see from the map, each of our 6 regional partners is color-coded based on the states that they cover. In the Northeast, it's RCAP Solutions, which is headquartered in Worcester, Massachusetts, but covers the entire Northeastern seaboard, as well as Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. In the Southeast, it's the Southeast RCAP or CERCAP. They're headquartered in Roanoke, Virginia, but cover the entire Eastern seaboard from Maryland, Delaware, all the way down through Florida. In the Great Lakes region, it's Great Lakes Community Action Partnership, or Great Lakes CAP. They're headquartered in Fremont, Ohio, but cover from Wisconsin down and over through West Virginia. In the South, it's Communities Unlimited. They're headquartered in Fayetteville, Arkansas, but cover from Texas over through Alabama and up to Tennessee. In the Midwest, it's our Midwest Assistance Program, or MAP. They're headquartered in Maryville, Missouri, and cover from Montana over through Minnesota down through Missouri. And on the west side of the country, we've got RCAC, the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, which covers the 11 westernmost states, including Alaska and Hawaii. Just to set the table a little bit about our work in water, wastewater across the country. Last year alone, we worked a little over 2,000 communities. Representing those 2,000 communities, we reached more than 3.2 rural and tribal residents and over 1.2 million households. But what's really unique about RCAP is not only that we reach the smallest communities across the country, but we also reach some of the most economically diverse and some of the most vulnerable populations across the country. More than 1 million of those that we worked with on the water wastewater side last year came from communities of color. 7% of those came from tribal or indigenous populations, including Alaska Natives, and 6% of our trainings in particular went directly to those communities. We really try and focus on those communities that need assistance the most. And when we talk about assistance, it's fundamentally about building capacity for those communities. It's coming in, helping them understand if they've got a technical, managerial, or financial issue that they're dealing with, how do they build their capacity at the local level to ensure that their system is sustainable, but also they can continue to provide that access to safe drinking water or sanitary wastewater in the ways that make the most sense for them locally. And we do that with some of the most distressed communities across the country. To give you a little bit of the geographic dispersion of our projects, you can see across the country here, every project that we worked on last year. So we covered every state, every territory, including the Pacific territories across the country with that capacity building technical assistance and training that we're providing. But we also do more than just on the ground work. So we are a network of nonprofit partners. Those 6 regional partners are working directly with communities every day. But as part of the national efforts that we do as a network, we also are doing work around partnerships, building partnerships like we have with ARWO, as well as many other partners on the ground in communities. But we're also helping to try and find other opportunities for communities to access partners and the resources those partners might bring to bear. We also are doing quite a bit of work around storytelling and advocacy. We want to help raise the voice of small communities, whether that's rural or tribal areas across the country, into conversations that they may not have access to themselves. We're also accompanying all of this work with research. So we're doing a number of research projects, one in particular on regionalization, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then obviously the programs that we're running across the country that are providing that on the ground technical assistance and training. What really makes us unique when compared to some of the other organizations that are focused on this is we take a really long-term approach to the technical assistance and training that we provide. We want to be there for the communities for as long as they need, but also provide the capacity so they don't need us beyond the work that we're doing with those communities. We also act in many cases as a neutral third-party facilitator. So we're there without an end goal in mind for the community. We want to help the community identify what that end goal is, but provide resources and expertise to help them find the right path to that end goal for them. We also want to make sure that we are working with communities from a regional perspective. We do quite a bit of work around regionalization on the water wastewater side, but we're also doing work around economic development to make sure that communities are thinking about collaborating as opposed to competing. And we're obviously a national network, but also has local and trusted relationships on the ground. So I want to talk a little bit about the current situation that we're in COVID and some of the impacts that it has had on communities directly, but also certainly in this larger conversation around regionalization. Probably one of the main drivers for regional collaboration is some type of emergency or crisis. And certainly COVID is that for many rural and tribal areas across the country. The pandemic is unique. It's not like a hurricane or a tornado that comes through or even flooding that's happening, but it's going to have a lot of the same lasting impacts on the water wastewater systems that we see, both from a financial perspective, but also from some of the long-term sustainability and resiliency pieces when you're considering water and wastewater projects in rural communities. Many of the systems we work with had already created some type of partnership. And from what we see anecdotally from those communities, those that had already started building these relationships and these conversations are doing much better in relation to COVID and the impacts that we're seeing on the ground in communities. But it is a process. You start with one conversation, you build to a second, to a third, to a fourth, and it oftentimes takes several years for true collaboration to really start happening. The major goal from our perspective on regionalization is one of sustainability and resilience. The crisis obviously is pulling back the curtain on some of the areas that are most fragile in rural water wastewater systems and the dynamics that exist in communities. And so building that sustainability and the resilience that comes with regional collaboration is a really key and crucial part of the work around this. So I want to kind of go high level first and talk about what we consider to be regionalization. There's a lot of words that are thrown out. You got regionalization, regional collaboration, partnerships, even consolidation, that are all terms that in many cases are used across the spectrum. But for RCAP, we focus on a broad spectrum of regionalization opportunities. It could be anything as simple as informal cooperation that doesn't actually have a contractual obligation. It could mean sharing equipment between communities, or it could mean mutual aid agreements between communities to make sure that they've got something in place in case a disaster comes about or an operator gets sick in some way, shape, or form. All the way to that physical connection of pipes or ownership transfer that you might see in communities. What we do is we come into communities and we help them understand what that full spectrum of opportunities is, both what the opportunities are, but also what are the issues that they might be confronted along the way, and help educate them on where there are opportunities to collaborate, what they need to put in place to be successful in that collaboration, and also recognize that there are some pieces of regionalization that may never be feasible in communities, whether because of geographic dispersion or whether it's because of political realities that exist on the ground. So we as a network have been doing this work around regionalization for almost 2 decades now. We have been doing it in, as you can see in the map here, in most states across the country. But over the last 3 years, we've had a really specific and intentional focus on regional collaboration. 2 years ago, we started a new program where we actually hired full-time technical systems providers specifically focused on regionalization, where their only priority and job was to be facilitating these conversations on the ground. It's been a really effective strategy in those states that we started with, and we certainly see an opportunity to grow that in the future. So I want to give you a very quick case study showing some of the work that we're doing. This one specific, excuse me. Sorry about that.
It's important work. I'm sorry it gets you all choked up.
Apologize for that, everyone. So let me go back here to the presentation itself. So in New Mexico, we have been working with the Lower Rio Grande Public Water Works Authority for more than 15 years. This work started back in 2004 and really started as a partnership between 5 mutual domestic water associations, and really started with just meeting regularly to discuss the challenges that they were confronting in their own communities. We built upon that starting in 2004 with more regular meetings to help build relationships across those associations and thinking about additional ways to partner. Eventually, we created a joint powers authority with the help of our regional partner, RCAC, the Western RCAP, in the work that they were doing. So in 2005, the first kind of formal partnership emerged with a memorandum of understanding between 4 of the mutual domestic water associations. Over the course of the next 4 years, an additional, the 5 founding associations merged formally to create the Lower Rio Grande Authority and continued work all the way through the next decade. In 2016, 4 additional domestic water associations joined the authority. And what we see here is really the true case study of what happens when you're talking about regionalization. It's not something that generally happens in the course of 1 month or even sometimes 1 year. It often is the course of several years of conversations and connections between and among communities. It has to be locally based, it has to be locally operated, and it's got to be in the best interest of each one of those communities. We talk about this example in particular because it is such a long-standing relationship. It started with a very informal conversation that was facilitated by our partner, RCAC, and has certainly evolved into a much more formal structure, creating the water authority itself. If you'd like to learn a little bit more information, we do have a video. It's 7 minutes long, so I didn't want to show it today, but it's a great example of the long-standing and trusted relationships that are really crucial and key to building regionalization opportunities itself. So talk a little bit more just briefly, and then we'll get to the panel about our work on regionalization and the national work that we're trying to push forward on this. So we brought together community leaders to actually understand what are the tools that are necessary to successfully bring forward regionalization projects and regional collaboration. We took the learnings that we had from multiple technical systems providers across the country to start to think about what are the pieces we need to put in place for communities? What do we need to help communities understand about the regionalization process? And what are the issues that they might confront along the way? We did that as part of a large research project, which we launched this March. And then we're building on that success to bring additional learnings from a policy perspective. So what are the federal and state policy recommendations we can bring to bear to incentivize more regionalization? So in that project about community lessons learned, we asked about 6 main things. Number 1, the basic pieces of advice and lessons learned from those that have gone through regionalization, both the positive and the negative. What are the things that communities need to consider and understand when they're thinking about a regional collaboration opportunity? We asked them what actually drove them to those regionalization opportunities. Was there a specific event or opportunity that allowed them to think about a regional collaboration that maybe they weren't thinking of in the past? We spent a lot of time talking about trust. And how do you build that trust between and among communities? And what was expected of community leaders along that process. We talked a lot about the process behind it. What moved the process along? What type of resources need to be put in place? And then finally, what are the governance structures that worked? And quite frankly, those that didn't work that allowed for future opportunities to continue to grow and prosper. We put together this research report, which we launched in March, which had 3 different components to it, which you can see here at our website. But it's really about those lessons learned directly from community members around regional collaboration. And these are the 10 lessons that came out of that process that really helped to lead and think about new opportunities for regionalization projects on the ground. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jim and the panel and look forward to a great discussion, but really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and look forward to a great discussion.
All right, thanks, Nathan. Pat, go ahead. You'll be next up.
See if I can do this. Whoa. All right. There we go. Now, what do I do now? Slideshow. It didn't work. Oh.
Yeah, and if everybody can click on that little box in the upper right-hand corner, Tad, that'll
work. Okay.
Yeah, it'll go to full screen. So
all right, that'll work for people, and they can just do it that way.
Yep.
Sorry about that. I'm old.
Tad, you can just go to the slideshow tab and then just press click from start.
Well, it's what I thought I tried. Oh, there it is. All right, can you see it now? Full screen?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a lag on my end, but yes.
Okay.
You can see your screen, yeah.
All right, thanks. So this is Arkansas, just so you all get an understanding of what's going on, that we have a population of about 3 million people with 740 public water systems. This is all the different systems in the map. It's most of them. And as you can also see, most of them serve less than 10,000 people, and over almost 3/4 of them serve less than 2,500 people. And there's only one that serves more than 100,000, and that's CAW, which is Central Arkansas Water. So when you talk about regionalization, I think one of the most interesting aspects of Central Arkansas Water, and I've lost it, there we go. One of the most interesting things of Central Arkansas Water is that it was formed with the merger of Little Rock and North Little Rock, which are kind of right here in the center of the light blue area there. And it's funny that you mentioned speed of trust, because we talk about having to have trust a whole lot. And Central Arkansas Water actually grew out of a total lack of trust. Little Rock and North Little Rock politically did not trust each other on the water supply issues, and there was beginning to be developed some water wars technically between the two communities. And it was actually the business community and the Regional Chamber of Commerce that came forward and said, we're not going to do this, folks. We're trying to build communities here. We're trying to build our businesses. We're trying to create stronger communities here, and we're not going to do this. And so it was actually the business community that came forward and drove the regionalization. Nathan mentioned earlier that crisis is often a frequent driver of these regionalization efforts, and this truly was but it was a politically created crisis that came about if they just couldn't agree on anything. And what you need to know is that all the water supply lakes and the treatment plants are on the south side of the river in Little Rock, and North Little Rock just had pipelines going across bridges to be able to supply those areas, and they were their own distribution system, but they didn't have a supply source, and they just developed this really bad relationship between the two parties, and so they merged. After that, with a little bit of effort, it's grown incredibly, and now there's 8 systems within Central Arkansas Water service territory, and we just consolidated this big purple area over here. And for us, what this actually represents is the move from a truly urban system, because the systems that have been consolidated before were city systems, and our wholesale customers are city systems. Are there urban areas, at least if they're not a city system? But Perrin-Owensville is the first one that, here we have about 300 miles of pipe, and you see the area covered is almost as big as CAW's existing, or prior to that, existing retail area. But this was a small system that, again, was in crisis, and their crisis was a workforce crisis. They actually bought raw water from CAW. They had a small treatment plant that they built. They have about 900 customers, but they were operated and had been operated since they were created by a husband and wife team. And literally, this husband and wife team loved this utility that they had operated for a very long period of time, but they couldn't go on vacation. They couldn't go anywhere because if something happened, there was nobody in the community to repair the systems or tweak the treatment plant operations or change anything. And so they were getting ready to retire, and there was just nobody there to be able to operate it. Now, what we had offered to them before is, look, we'll go on vacation. We'll send a couple of operators out to take care of your system. And if something happens that a pipe needs to be repaired, but then even that just became a concern for them and what have you. So finally, they came and talked to us about, well, could you just include Perrin-Owensville as part of your system? And so this is where we've just in June, we took over operations of the system in June of this year. And it's kind of our first foray into the truly rural system as we look at it and how it's done. You see a white blob in the middle right there. And that's a West Pulaski Public Water Authority that was formed more than a decade ago to bring water to that area. Under Arkansas state law, once they formed and kind of grabbed the area, we couldn't go in and serve it. They had it formed, but they still, to this date, do not have a system. They've never been able to get everybody on board. They've never been able to put their funding together. A group of people interested in the way of life out there formed this entity, got the area assigned to them to operate it, but they still do not have a water system. Everybody is still on wells. Some of those wells are okay. Some of those wells deliver very poor water quality. So later this summer, in fact, in late August, early September, this service territory was actually assigned to Central Arkansas Water. They assigned the service territory to us. And again, it's a regional effort that we went out and had community meetings in the region to say, we have the resources, we can get this done. It is still a project very much in process. There are some people that I will say are the more urbanites that live in this very rural area. For instance, they come into work for the city and they know what CAW can do. And so they're very interested in getting water. And there's a number of people in this area that don't want anything to do with the city. They're very skeptical of the city. They don't want the city out there, so to speak. And even though we're independent from the city of Little Rock or North Little Rock, we're very much viewed as them. And so this is really going to be a trust building exercise with this community for as we move forward and bring water into this area to be able to provide them and take out the wells, particularly those that are poorly performing. So this is just kind of the current challenges on regionalization that are there. Again, even with our wholesale partners, I'm going to back up here a minute. Even with our wholesale partners in this map that you see, and the wholesale partners are all in green, they trust our water supply and they trust what we deliver. But when you talk about moving past that, is there more than just providing wholesale services? There becomes an element of local control that we all hear about, that people want to keep local control and they want to have authority, and they don't want to give up control to the big player. And where that comes down to is if you look at the number of connections between Little Rock and the cities of Little Rock and North Little Rock, it's about 137,000 connections. You add on a few other areas that are really part of ours, and you're up to about 145,000. And then when you go to the last part of it, you say, okay, how many connections do we have? We have 153,000. That's all the other areas around there included in. And so there's a big power differential that's concerning to these communities as we look for regionalization. Just so you know, here's Perrin over here on the west side. If you go over here on the east side where this brown blob is, that's Lone Oak County, which is Grand Prairie Water. And it's the largest system in the state, but it's even more spread out than Perrin. So one of the things that we've been looking at as we discuss regionalization with our board is this fundamental map right here, and we call it the 50-miler map. And people say, why 50 miles? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. And if you also look, there's this funny little line down on the bottom for that area that is south, everything south of Interstate 40 that runs between Memphis and Texarkana and comes through Little Rock. And Interstate 30, sorry, 40 goes to the north. Interstate 30 that comes in there. And the reason this circle is drawn to the north of that is that most of these systems are fundamentally systems like we already operate. Perrin is a big example for us on this map. It's this big pink blob, but the other systems in the area are pretty much of the density that we're used to operating. But when we talk about regionalism, it's what we talk about. The other is water supply. When you go 50 miles, you hit all the multiple water sources that are available in central Arkansas. We own Lake Maumelle and Lake Winona outright. We have the right for 100 million gallons a day out of DeGray Lake. Ouachita only has about 30 million gallons a day available for municipal water supply. Ouachita River has less than that. Greer's Ferry Lake has about 30 million gallons available. And then Lake Catherine has less than that. So with this circle, then you could also tap all of those water supplies, because one of the interesting things that's occurred is that all these systems, if we back up, all these systems around this area are dependent on Central Arkansas water for water supply. There's not an alternative, and they come to us. But all these systems together, with a few of them have some wells, they have some other areas that they might connect. If you put them all together, should CAW need water from somebody else, they don't have enough water supply, even our minimum day. Our minimum day is around 30 million gallons a day. And all the systems within that 50-mile map that we showed you that do not have enough water supply to be able to provide water to the central part of the economic driver for the region, which is Little Rock and North Little Rock. They don't have enough water to help out, but they all look to CAW for assistance should they need a backup water source. And so development of these water sources and becoming the ability to become more redundant and have emergency supplies that flow both directions is actually one of the large drivers that's kind of pushing this conversation for regionalism in the area. Now, to build on what Nathan was talking about, when we go back to this big map that you're looking to here, here's our problem. Everything north of Interstate 30, which is this red line that's running right here, is growing in population. Everything north, if you look at a long-term aspect, everything north of that line and going west from that line is growing in population. Everything south of that line is declining in population. So we have water systems in part of the poorest part of the state, just like Nathan was talking about, with declining populations and aging water systems. And so one of the things that we've tasked ourselves with, and that our board is actually on board with doing, is how do we help this area? We're right here at the borderline. We are right here with all the technical resources, with all the equipment needs, with the technology, the lab work, the chemistry work, everything that's needed. So how do we help this area in the south part of the state? And what does that regional partnership look like? It's fundamentally probably going to look much different than what our current regional efforts and our current regional partnerships look like. But we're still working on how do we develop and how do we help out this part of the state. I mean, my common line that I give frequently is a flint anywhere in the state of Arkansas will kill economic development in the state of Arkansas. I mean, it's just not going to help us out as we struggle for more economic development and promoting of our state for economic growth. So how do we avoid that? And how do we look at it? And so how do we work with these communities? And it's interesting because there's still even some of that same distrust. I was talking to the Municipal League, which puts on a mayor's conference every summer. And last summer before last, pre-COVID, we were down in place, and I said, you all have got to look to your neighboring systems. And I said, we've done the math, and we think, you know, if you really want to be a strong regional system, you need a minimum of 8 to 10,000 meters. And a mayor came up to me afterwards and said, well, I've looked and I'm thinking about all the communities that kind of surround my city, and I can't get to 8 to 10,000 meters. And my response had to be, then you need to broaden your circle. You need to get bigger, because you know that level gives you the growth and gives you the capacity that you become economically sustainable within your operations. And how does that look for? So that's all I have right now. I appreciate everybody, and I look forward to answering questions.
Thanks, Tad. Randy, you're up.
How do I unmute?
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, we appreciate the fact that Tad and Nathan together have actually told the greatest story, and they've read right out of the ARWO playbook. And I tell you, the principles that you guys are talking about are just absolutely true to form. Tad gives us the idea of what it means when you're talking about the type of populations that he serves, and it just astounds me. It's outside of my realm of understanding. Since we serve, Nathan, about 15,000 population of about 15,000, covering 10,000 square miles, and I'm not sure if I have the ability to do this properly, but I will. I don't know that I can. We'll give it a try here, but. Can you all see that?
Randy, just go ahead and click the share screen button at the bottom. And if that's not working, I've got it up too. I can go ahead and just share my screen.
Okay, if you want to do that, Astrid, that would be fine. I only have 2 slides, so it'll move fairly quickly that way. If we do it that way. If you'd like to do that, while Astrid is pulling that up, I just want to just kind of give you an overview. The first slide that she's going to pull up is where we were at of just a county-wide system in 1980. We started off with about 925 connections, family farms and homes. And then the area that we're at right now at the turn of the century covers about 10,000 square miles in parts of 11 counties. And at the turn of the century, we were encouraged by local communities that we had a relationship with. Well, you're bringing water into the homes. Why can't you just go ahead and bring take care of the wastewater outside? So for a few minutes, I just want to talk about collaborating with wastewater solutions and Midwest Assistance Program, not only with the Dakotas, but also with Montana, Minnesota, Missouri, and Iowa, is our partner there. That provides that balanced, very neutral example of what we can do collaboratively together. So Nathan, hats off on the work that we did together when we did that work. And we do have a white paper that the White House asked for, and Kelly Grappler, my deputy CEO, put it together. And I'm just going to give a couple of real quick details out of that white paper, but it is available if you ask us for it. But basically what we found when we were trying to do regionalized solutions for wastewater problems is the economy of scale isn't there, and the condition of the wastewater. You can't move that wastewater more than 10 or 15 miles in these very smallest communities and make it work economically feasible. So therefore, the model that Nathan described, where you're having a joint powers authority or agreement, would actually build wastewater systems in the various communities to serve those communities. And what we found out once we put those in place, and we built 12 of them, by the way, and now we also do contract operations for 10, that they remain completely independent, and they still own and have their own facilities, and they built them themselves, but we operate them for them. So it's a different type of relationship. And there was at least 24 others that we helped through the technical assistance process. And that technical assistance process was an outcropping from this need to take care of the problem that Iowa had. You see, it's not just the Appalachians or the Colonias or the Mississippi Delta that has problems with geographic problems or looking at regionalizations. As Nathan indicated, politics is always a driver, But even the state of Iowa has 30% of the state does not have availability to public water supply. And at the turn of the century and at the 21st century. Also, we had 700 incorporated and unincorporated communities that had no centralized wastewater system. These communities were all operating out of compliance with individual septic tanks that were violation of the Clean Water Act and distributing into the rivers and streams of the state of Iowa, into streams, creeks, rivers, farm drainage, tile systems. The non-point solution, point source pollution, there's always a discussion about that, but that was the genesis that started putting together the utility management organizations of Iowa. And what we did is we split up all 99 counties, and there were 6 groups that were developed with the assistance of MAP. And we put these, and 3 of them were regional water systems that were already into the wastewater business, and 3 of them organically started out with a combination of these counties coming together and operating through their Department of Health, their county sanitarians, the Regional Council of Governments, economic development groups, all took the lead in forming these individual joint powers authorities in these areas to try to reduce this 700 unsewered community issue. And it was hugely successful. I'm not exactly sure, but I think the number has dropped almost in half now since then, in about 20 years of unsewered communities. But here's the takeaway from what we found out with that is the regionalization of the communities that we had, all of them that we operate and all of them that we own and operate. We have sustained the populations. So Tad is absolutely right. In the rural parts of rural America, it's declining. But if you put wastewater, you put water, and now we're working on housing initiatives and fiber, those small communities can be sustained at the level that they're at right now. But more importantly, we have regional water systems have at their resources, the financial resources to look at really very, very robust financial models that we can, when we go into these communities, and once you start with the relationship building, it can take anywhere from 8 months to 8 years to do that relationship building. What we find out is those financial models from, if you look out 20 years to 50 years, it is the only solution that will actually provide the life cycle costs that is a financially resilient, sustainable system, is if they participate within a joint powers authority or agreement. That's a remarkable story to tell. And what I see coming out of this conference, Nathan, what we really need to do with your 6 entities is all of the members of ARWO and all of your members need to collaborate right now and start telling our story during this transition period, because these type of solutions are really, from what we found out, are the only really sustainable financial solutions, not the independents. Short term it might, but they're going to come back to the well, and they're not going to be able to continue on forward without continuing to be subsidized either from the state or the federal government. That is where I'm going to stop, Mr. Morris, and we've got maybe a minute or two if there's any questions.
All right, Randy. Thank you. Thanks, Tad. Thanks, Nathan. I'll check here. I know there's been several comments asking for your everybody's slides that you guys had used, and Randy, we weren't able to get Astrid to pull yours up, but we will provide those out to everybody that's attended, and they'll be available on our website for those that are members that can get in. Let me see if there's any questions. I think one of the issues, and again, you guys have related stuff regarding your individual systems, and the system that serves my home here and that I serve on the board for, as most of you know that I work with, we're about 1,500 connections, water and sewer, and we have, because of there's about an 8-mile distance between these 2 developments, we're all residential. So we have 2 wastewater plants and 2 drinking water plants. And it's 1,500 total connections. So that alone, those of you that have run the systems can see financially what the challenges are. We're in a fairly well-off area. Our water and sewer bill averages about $140 a month for water and sewer, probably on the higher end of what most of you have. But our system, is not close to anybody. We're out here in rural Colorado, and there's nothing else next to us. And we're a district, so that creates challenges as far as trying to hook additional people outside our district up. But I think one of the challenges, we have is we're small. We have the ability to charge, unusually high rates, but our system is not doing well. And I'm just wondering, how you guys would get to, a system like us that's very remote and, not likely the chance. There's probably some chance for some additional connections if we can work around the district, structure here in Colorado. But if you guys can give me, Tad, I'll go to you first. Give me a little, what's the solution for a small system like us that's literally in the middle of nowhere?
The solution that we've been discussing and looking to work at, and that we are actually experimenting with in some Perrin and some other areas, is effectively the piloting the circuit rider approach. I mean, we have traditionally worked in the water and wastewater sector as centralized, bring everything in or push everything out from a central point or from a central location. And is it going to be more efficient in the long run? And is it going to work? And the only way you're going to do and be able to bring the technology that George was talking about yesterday, to bring those best practices and the technology to these smaller independent systems, is that you work regional together, and then you basically have circuit riders of the professionals and what have you going around and checking on the efficiency of the treatment systems, and then you have the crew availability and the equipment availability to come in and make repairs when necessary from a much larger pool of systems.
Thanks, Tad. Randy?
Yes, I totally concur. And under that same umbrella of joint powers authority or agreement, that O&M can keep those operating costs down. And that's a huge impact in terms of the life cycle costs. The O&M is a big piece of life cycle costs and long-term financial resiliency. With that comes emergency preparedness, where you can have emergency crews that can come in if necessary, vacations, pandemics, bringing in the manpower when needed. Here's another thing that Tad probably can do, and Jim LaPlante can do, and Randy VanDyke can do. We have OSHA trained tower maintenance crews that we actually do our own interior maintenance. We're in those tanks every other year. We keep up that's a fraction of the cost having that done outside. Special projects like directional boring and putting in services and add-ons and so forth can be done by collaborating with those type of things. Billing, administrative services can keep those costs down, as well as what we're doing now for ourselves and for other people. Fixed base meter reading is not practical in 10,000 square miles. And drive-by, to reduce those costs, we do fly-by right now. So we read all of our meters by aircraft. Thinking outside the box for your territory and where you can come in, we reach out 2 hours to do field service calls every day. And for technical assistance, we drive anywhere from 3 to 5 hours when we're called upon to do those type of things, with arrangements that we have with these communities. And communities that are out of compliance, that we're doing short-term contract operations to bring them into compliance. We'll travel anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to do that, or we'll get boots on the ground in that locality under that authority to make those things happen. Those things can actually be addressed as long as you're hitting the root canal syndrome that Moonshot was talking about.
Thanks, Randy. Nathan will give you the final word. And in a couple minutes, Glenn Marzloff, our incoming president, will join us as well. So, Nathan, any comments?
The only other thing I would add to what Ted and Randy said is it's a perfect example that regionalization is not always the connection of pipes, right? There's opportunities to build up collaboration in a multitude of ways, whether it's sharing the cost of operators or circuit rider, as Tad was talking about, whether it's thinking about other innovations, as Randy was just describing, there are ways to build in relationships that help with economies of scale, that help with other aspects of your system to make sure that both you maintain the system and the operations of the system, but also that it's financially viable in the long run. And so, regionalization can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different communities. And your situation is different from a situation that Tad's going to be dealing with in Arkansas. It's different than what Randy's going to be dealing with. But also in many ways could be very similar. And so there's lots of different models and opportunities to think about other ways to collaborate outside of necessarily just connecting the pipes.
All right. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks to the panel. You guys did a great job. Astrid, do you have Glenn queued up?
Here I am. Great timing. Well, appreciate that. So that was an extraordinary presentation. Thank you all. And here's our map. It's a paper map, but Chris Ty, our business operations manager at our GS department, worked on that. And it has all the municipalities and other systems within 20 miles of an 8-inch water main. So appreciate that very much. Randy made this comment about he can't fathom the size and the density of what Central Arkansas has, their TAD systems. Well, I can assure you it goes both ways, right? TAD and we can't fathom the disconnectedness, the lack of density that is there at Iowa Lake. And I look forward to coming to visit you sometime. Thank you all for attending our first ever virtual conference. Thank you so much, Randy VanDyke, for your leadership as president these last 2 years. Certainly this last year has been a challenge to lead in different ways. We appreciate that. Appreciate Bill Teichmiller. Thanks to you for starting this organization. Actually, we were texting a couple nights ago about our first opportunity to sit down and have coffee in Seattle in 2014 when he threw out this mind-boggling idea of another trade organization that focused on those that were not being served appropriately by any of the existing trade organizations. And that's the niche that we're trying to fill here. I appreciate the opportunity to work with the new slate of elected officers, Hector Gonzalez, Tad Bohannon, Ron Sink, Jim LaPlante, and the entire board. Appreciate your leadership and your ability to serve and the time that you're going to dedicate to the mission. The staff, Jim Morris and Eric and Astrid and Emily at EJ, our marketing team, Brad Voigt for the accounting that he does. We really appreciate that. So thankful for what we've accomplished so far, for the reputation that we built. I don't think Brent Fuel was exaggerating. I think we really do have a great reputation inside the Beltway in DC. What we're selling is appropriate. It's a sustainable fix to the water industry, and that's why we're well received, is because we're selling the real goods. So we appreciate that. In 2021, I appreciate the opportunity to serve you. It's going to be a challenge, right? To serve in the time of the coronavirus. How do we provide that value to our members? We're going to do that virtually for the next few months, and hopefully we'll be able to get together. Hopefully some of these things that we've talked about, these vaccines and other things, will allow us to continue to build relationships in person. But in the meantime, I appreciate the opportunity to develop those friendships, develop those relationships in a virtual capacity in the short term. Invite anyone considering membership. Please contact Jim Morris or myself. We're offering this half-off membership for this coming year for new members, and if that's a challenge for you based on the economics here in the coronavirus, we'll work with you. Let us know if you're willing. More than anything, we want active members that are willing to take an opportunity to network with us and to share their experiences. That's what we're looking. I want to thank the conference team. So some of these names are already brought up here: Astrid and Emily and Jim for your work there, for Kelly Grandflower and all the Iowa Lakes team for all that they've done here recently to work on the board packets and everything related to the board meetings. They've really supported us greatly and supported Randy's term as president there. And I want to thank all the speakers, everybody, for dedicating your time to this event that we've had here virtually. You joined us from all over the country, from Maine to Texas and everywhere else. And just want to thank the attendees for tuning in to our first virtual conference. We will be sharing our virtual offerings here that are coming out in the next couple months, the board meetings, our next board meeting will probably be sometime in January, where we'll work on some of the committees and some of the other things and really establish what we're trying to focus on for 21 as the new administration rolls in. So with that, again, I appreciate the time that you've dedicated to come to our first virtual conference, and we're going to close the conference. All right. Thanks so much. Again, appreciate all of you and for your dedication to regional water and to the Association of Regional Water Organizations.
Thank you so much, Glenn, and thank you all for attending. I did want to say one more thing. If you've attended the last 2 days and your utility is not an ARWO member, you do have a 50% off discount for the coming year. So keep that in mind. You can just go to our website, which is arwo.org. and just fill out an application, and then we'll kind of cross-reference that with everyone that attended. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to have you. So thank you all for your time. Have a great evening.
Thank you.